Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It's great to see lots of people coming from all over the UK. Welcome to our webinar. This is our introductory webinar to Single Friendly Church and the audit. So just to start with, I'll introduce myself. I'm Amelia. I'm the Executive Director. We've also got Beth, who will be speaking to you later. She's the Campaign Manager. We also have Ruth, and she's making connections around the UK with all sorts of dioceses and networks and other groups to introduce our work. Jackie Elton, our founder and director, is able to join us today, and you're going to hear a little bit more from Jackie in a few moments. So Single Friendly Church started just over 5 years ago, and it grew out of a piece of work commissioned by Christian Connection. It was a survey which was commissioned. We're a non-profit organisation, and we're delighted that Christian Connection continue to support us to this day. We're really grateful for that support. The survey was set up to capture the views of single Christians and really find out what their experience of church was. And nobody had anticipated what the results were going to be, but overwhelmingly it became apparent that many single Christians were feeling isolated, they were feeling lonely, excluded, hurt and undervalued. So Single Friendly Church had to set up, not only to publish the results of these findings, but also to provide further research, produce guides and resources to support single Christians. And over the past 5 years, the organisation has continued to do this, and we've got a wealth of these resources on our website. And we've also given talks and sort of put on events for single Christians. However, it did become apparent that if we wanted to really make a difference, we needed to be more proactive and work with churches and church leaders to make change, to help them identify where change can be made, and also sort of to provide help with this. So we now really have pitched ourselves and see ourselves as a campaigning organisation, highlighting the issues around singleness and helping churches to make changes so that single Christians feel welcomed, valued and included. So I'm going to hand over to Jackie now, who's briefly going to tell you a little bit more about the origins of Single Friendly Church.
Thank you very much, Amelia. So yes, I started Christian Connection in the year 2000. That's when we launched. And so it's just over 20 years. And of course, at the time, we were just setting up a dating site for Christians that would be a site that Christians could trust. And it was all about, people meeting and getting married. But as the numbers grew and as we got to know our members, we began to realize that people had other needs than simply just getting to meet other people, important though that was. And we would do little surveys and find out how people felt about their lives and their churches. And from that growing realization and really getting to know people through events, it became, I really decided, it was in 2012 actually, to do a really major survey with over 50 questions. I knew nothing about surveys at the time, so I called in Dr. David Pullinger to help me out, and we created this massive survey, and something like 3,000 people just off the bat filled in this huge survey, which took ages to analyze. But the basic story came out, and it was very clear that so many people in their churches felt their churches really didn't know, so many of them didn't know what to do with them, and that there was just so much need there. And there was a story that I don't think had been told, not in that kind of detail, not with that many people participating. And so, as Amelia said, we published the results. People were really interested. There were a lot of articles. We had some lectures and events, but then what? And that was what was so difficult. There was no intention on my part to set up a campaign. It was like, that's far too difficult. Nobody's actually going to be interested in this. But as the time grew on, we realized that was something that really had to happen because, churches, a lot of people were in such need, and it was just crying out to happen. And so gradually we entered into a strategy. Really, this time last year, the strategy was put in place. And I'm really very pleased to welcome people here today. Our last two webinars have been quite amazing. The response has been great. I hope you're going to enjoy this hour. So we now have a video which really encapsulates a lot of the information very nicely and very briefly. Thank you.
So there we have a little taster of our organisation. So when we've been out and about at festivals, when we've met people at exhibitions, we really wanted to gather an idea of what does single look like. That's really the starting point for all of this. We need to ascertain in our churches who is single and what does single look like. And when we've met people out and about, we have heard comments like, we don't have single people in our church. And it's always taken us aback a bit because we know this is untrue. And perhaps it's because people haven't really thought about who is sitting in their church, who comes to their church, who's a member and what their status is. We know that in the UK, approximately 40% of the adult population are single. And there can be many sort of various assumptions made about who is single. Groups might pop into our minds. However, we'd really like to hear your thoughts about this. Singleness comes at all ages and stages of life, and those different groups have different needs and issues. In other words, we're talking about a really diverse group of people, and it's not just a sort of one glove fits all type of solution. Even in these groups, in the divorced group, there will be single parents, there will be, in the widow group, there will be those with children, those without. In the separated category, there's so many different divisions and different groups of single people. And obviously, with so many different groups and categories of single people, there's going to be different things that those people need. So our next stage is to really think about what are the issues that some of these groups of single people are facing. What do single people say about church? And from our findings, from our original survey and the responses that we've gathered over the 5 years, generally people feel that there is an acceptance of single people, but there's a lack of understanding about the implications of being single. And people are feeling excluded from certain areas of church life. What people are saying to us, and we're finding, is that they often feel that churches are very family focused. And especially at the moment during lockdown, there's been a real focus, not just in our churches, but also in life in general, talking about families, households, groups of and things like that. People are feeling that there are talks and courses for everybody except singles. If they're feeling that celebrations in church often appear to be family focused, for instance, Mothering Sunday or celebrations around marriage anniversaries. And there's also a perception that school is often orientated around a school calendar. And this is not to say that single people don't want anything to do with family groups or family issues. It's simply that there's an unequal emphasis towards families and their needs. And this quote is, all our quotes that we have today are from real people. My church is so family focused. I notice that I stand in church alone and it hurts. In fact, so much so that currently I'm on a break from church. I mean, that's so sad. It's so awful that someone feels so isolated within their church, that they feel so on their own that they can't go to church. This really echoes in the feeling of people feeling lonely in the midst of church. We have another quote here coming up. When I look around the church on Christmas Day, everyone seems to be with their blood family in church, at which point I no longer feel that church is my family. And we know that church is about being a family. That's what we hear, that's what we read in the Bible. But people are still feeling that actually when groups are going to church, they are in units, in family, blood family groups, and it's not this whole body of the church. Another comment that we've heard, another area that we need to think about in a similar vein, is that people are feeling invisible. A family focus that means that families often notice other families, but not people on their own. And this sort of comes along into, we need to think about the social life of the church. Many people, single people, are feeling accepted and included by the church, but excluded from the social life that they perceive that's going on amongst families. They often feel that it's acceptable socially when people are in a family or in a couple. And it can often be harder for single people to feel comfortable attending a church function or a social event on their own. Another thing that we've become aware of is that single people sometimes feel that they're thought of as a sort of a useful service rather than being valued as an individual. They feel that they might be given the unfriendly hours of jobs that need to be done. There's assumptions made that they don't have the other commitments that that people with families or partners have, that they have more free time. So they can be assigned different jobs at unfriendly hours. But the reality is that they probably have different needs from those in a couple and a family, i.e. someone who is on their own, really unwell, probably needs help with their shopping, a lift to the doctors, prescriptions picking up. There's lots of examples of situations where single people could really do with a practical helping hand. And the quote here that really sort of encapsulates this is, "There's also nothing in place to make life ministry easy for single people. People look surprised when I can't make evening meetings as I don't have a babysitter." Another area that we've become really aware of is that single people are feeling isolated when they're in those middle years. There's an emphasis on children's ministry and the support for the elderly. However, singleness is at all ages and stages of life. And someone said to us, the church does not know what to do with single Christians between the ages of 30 and 60. You don't fit into any category. A group of that you picked up very much in the chat here was about people who've been widowed, and those who've been recently bereaved or long-term bereaved. And someone said to us, I noticed the change when I was widowed and became excluded virtually overnight. It was a very strange reaction, as previously my husband and I had been in leadership and also had singles as part of our extended family. Really need to think about the needs of those, as I say, those who are recently bereaved, and also the long-term bereaved, those who are perhaps not looking to be in a relationship again, and how their status has changed and the needs that they have. There's also another thing we need to be aware of, the threat of single women. There can often be negative perceptions made that or generally be difficult. That's why they're on their own. Equally, there can be sometimes negative perception of single men, that there's something wrong with them because they're not in a relationship. And these, can be really hurtful feelings and perceptions that people have about single people. Quite often, single people aren't represented in leadership. And there's also a lack of teaching on and understanding of singleness. And this is, of course, not to say that all churches don't think about their single members. Lots of churches really do think about the needs of their members at all ages and stages of life. And there's lots of programs and initiatives to be fully inclusive. However, sadly, in our experience, Single people are often overlooked, and we hear a lot from people who are feeling hurt and isolated. The COVID-19 pandemic may have brought this issue more to your attention. It certainly has to mine. When we were able to go back briefly and churches did reopen before this most recent lockdown, we were all very sort of busy dealing with the issues of making our churches COVID secure. And due to social distancing, single people were very visible in our churches. So it's almost like now is the perfect time to really take stock and think about these issues. We looked around, we could see people sitting on their own, coming on their own, having to stay on their own during the service. So having this visual reminder really does mean that we should be really knitting this into the work of our churches. And we've had lots of conversations with churches that said now they know they should do something, but they don't know exactly what to do. So now I'm going to hand over to Beth, who's going to tell you how we can help you and what you can do to really make a change in your church. So here's Beth.
Hi, thanks, Amelia. Yeah, so as you've heard, this is a very large and very broad-ranging issue with so many different types of singleness and so many things that we might need to do as a church. So as a church, it can be really hard to know where to start. And this is why we've come up with 5 steps to becoming a single-friendly church, which makes it as easy as possible for churches to make positive and practical changes. These 5 steps, which you can see on your screen now, they refer to 5 key areas of church life and will help you to make small changes in each of these 5 areas that will actually make a big difference to single people's experience at church. So we've got who is single, we've got language, welcome, teaching, and leadership. So going first to who is single, that's basically what we've just been talking about how there are lots of different types of singleness. So this first step is all about considering what different groups of single people there might be in your church and what their different needs might be. You might have a lot of widows in your church, or lots of single parents, lots of young single people who may want to find a partner or who may not, lots of people between maybe the ages of 30 and 60. And so it's worth taking stock of who is in your church and where might the gaps be where you could meet their needs. And it's also worth thinking about what single people there might be in your local area who currently aren't coming to your church and why this might be. Moving on to step 2, this step is language. So this is all about thinking about the sorts of language that we use as a church, which could be in your services, on your website, or even on the sign outside of your church, the first thing that people see. And think about what message is it that you're giving out? Is your language inclusive, or is it more family focused? When people are looking for a new church, it's quite common to look at a church's website first before attending in person or popping on the Zoom meeting as we're doing at the moment, just to kind of check out, see what the feel of the church is. So think about if a single person visits your website, what impression will they get of your church? Will they feel like there is a place for them? Will they feel like they're welcomed and included and valued, coming on by themselves and being single? And it's also worth looking at the images on your website as well. If most of your photos are of couples and of 2-parent families, you might want to consider mixing up a bit and putting some more group shots on there and group pictures of friends kind of talking together, just to make sure that everyone is represented. And finally, it's really important to think about the word family as well. We often use family to talk about the family of God, but often this can be misunderstood as referring to nuclear families. So it can be quite a loaded word for many people, which includes childless couples as well, someone who might be married who doesn't have children. So using it to refer to services and social events like family barbecues or family fun day sometimes makes single people feel like they can't come by themselves because they're not coming as part of the family group. So if you have a family service, maybe you could consider changing the name to audit or altogether, or something that's appropriate for your context, so that everyone feels welcome to attend that service, whether they're coming as part of a traditional family unit or not. Step 3 is all about welcome, as you can see on your screen. And this is all about looking at how single people are welcomed and included in all areas of church life. So this could be walking through the door on a Sunday, or into the Zoom room, as I said, we're currently in lockdown, but also the social events and the wider social life that goes on outside of official church activities. So people going for dinner and having a cup of tea or a coffee after the service. And think about some of the barriers that single people might have and feel to attending and feeling fully included in the social life of the church. And actually, the biggest barrier that we found that for single people attending church is actually the physical act of turning up by yourself. And this applies for married people who are attending church as a single person as well. So maybe they're married to someone who doesn't believe, and so they're coming on their own on a Sunday, very much like a single person, and they're kind of single in their faith. And so how could you think about how you can make it easy for people to come on their own and welcome them so that they feel like they want to come back? And there are lots of different ways that you could do this. You could brief your welcome team to look out for people coming on their own. You could introduce a buddy system, on the Zoom chat. If you can see different pictures, make sure that if you see new people joining, that you're not just noticing couples and families, but you're also noticing individuals that pop up on the screen. Or you may find something else that will work better for your church context. And like I say, we all have different communities. Moving on to step 4. This is all about teaching in the church. So we've done language and welcome, and now this is about the teaching, what we're hearing from the front of church. And actually, the first thing to think about is who actually are the speakers in your church? And do you have any single people who are preaching? If you don't, could you identify some people who may have potential to preach, and could you mentor them? Could you train them? If you're in an Anglican church, you might want to consider recommending them for the lay readers course. If your church maybe has a more specific criteria or a certain level of theological training required to preach on a Sunday, could you invite a guest speaker from another church who's single? And make sure that the sermon illustrations that they use and the life applications from the talks are relevant for everyone, whether you're married or single, whether you're a parent or whether you don't have children. And remind preachers that not everyone listening is married or is a parent. Now, there's nothing wrong with using illustrations from our own lives and, using an example from, your family life. It's about balance. And so try not to do it in every single talk, in every single week. And it's the same with life applications. When you get to that point in your talk where, you're talking about how we can apply this to our lives and, live out this teaching, make sure you think about applications outside of the family context. So think about people sharing houses, think about the workplace, think about friendships and community, and all these things, a lot of them will apply for people who are married as well as people who are single. And this ensures that single people will feel that the teaching in your church and ultimately Christian faith itself is relevant to their life and is speaking into the context that they're living in. The final step is about leadership. And this is basically about having single people in all levels of leadership in your church. And this goes from at the front of church on a Sunday, whether it's the service leader or the worship leader or the person leading the prayers or giving the notices, down to our small groups. Do you have single people leading your small groups as well as married couples? And the reason why this is so important is whether we like it or not, single people in leadership do act as role models for the rest of the church. And actually physically having single people at the front of your service, it means a single person walks in from the street, they will see someone like them. So they'll see that, hey, maybe this church is for me. Maybe, I can follow Jesus and be single. I don't need to be married. And it's so important for the single people in our churches to see living examples of single people who have a fulfilled Christian life, who are thriving and have a really deep relationship with God, and yet they're not married. So those are the 5 steps. And these are just a few examples of the things that you can do. There are many more, which I won't go into right now. And you may be doing some or all of these things in your church already. And for others, as we saw in the poll, this might be completely new to you and you might not have thought about any of these things before. And that is absolutely fine, wherever you're coming from today. And that's why we're here. We're here to, give you ideas and to support you every step of the way on your journey to becoming a single-friendly church. And as you can see, even 1 or 2 changes in each of these 5 areas will make a huge difference to a single person's experience coming to your church and feeling welcome and included. Now, I know what you're thinking. How do I do all of that? How do I practically put this into action in my church? That's quite a huge task. And this is why we've created an audit tool, which is the best and the most simple way to work through these 5 steps. And this is a practical tool that will guide you through each step in detail. As you can see, we've got an example on the screen. This is step 4. And it basically will help you as you work through the audit to work out what actually is it that you're already doing really well for single people. What are the steps that you're doing well? Maybe you have fantastic teaching for single people. And where are the areas where you might need to make a few changes? Maybe you're really strong on teaching, but maybe you need to look at your welcome a bit more. This will just give you a really good overview of the situation that your church is in and how practically you can move forward to effective change. So as you can see on the left-hand side, you've got lots of examples, and these are just some suggestions of things that you could do. You do not have to do all of the things on this list. I mean, that would be wonderful, but we recognise that this would be a very big task. So there is no obligation to tick everything off, and some of them won't be relevant to your church. But there may be some that you're doing already, and there might be some that just pop out to you to think, oh, we haven't thought about that before. Maybe we could do that, in the next 6 months or something. And so some churches who are already really welcoming and doing a lot of this stuff, you might be able to whiz through the audit in an hour and say, hey, we're doing that, tick, tick, tick. And you can see just how well you're doing. And for other people, if you haven't thought about this before, this might be a longer process, and it might take 6 months to work through each step and really think about this and have chats with the single people in your church. And there's no deadline for this. It's definitely a sort of work in progress and a journey that each church will go on individually. If you're not a church leader and you're on the call today, you'll just want to make sure that you speak to your church leadership about this. It's good to have at least one church leader involved, as the leadership will need to be on board in order to see effective change in your church and ensure that single people are included in all areas and not just the areas that maybe you are involved in. And it's really important to have single people involved as well. Obviously, they have a very unique experience of church, and they'll have the knowledge to be able to spot little nuances that as a married person you may miss or maybe not quite understand. Some churches have even set up focus groups, and they're working through one step at a time, and they've gathered a small group of single Christians who feel really passionate about this issue, and they've just had some really fantastic conversations and really understood where single people in their churches are already feeling very welcome and very included, and areas where they might feel a bit overlooked and left out. So if you use this audit and you decide to fill it in and return it to us, then you can become an official single-friendly church. And we would love you to go all the way through this process and become an official verified single-friendly church. And the reason for this is we get emails all the time from single people who are looking for a church in the area where they will feel welcome and at home and valued in their singleness. So we've created an interactive map, which Sam is going to bring up now. And this is very new. It's on our website, and we currently have 4 single-friendly churches on the map who've gone through the audit, and we've got another few that are just coming through in the next week. So if you complete the audit and you return it to us, you can get featured on our map, and this will be really fantastic for single people in your local area to be able to find you. You might see that your church grows. One thing that's really great for single people in a church is if there are other single people there. So for the few single people who are in your church, if more single people come, then it's going to be a better experience for them. And obviously, as we said, 40% of the UK is single. So regardless of whether or not, hundreds of new people come to your church or just a few, you will become more inclusive and more welcoming to 40% of society that you may be missing out on at the moment. And we are here to support you every step of the way. Over 100 churches have the audit already, and we'd love you to do it as well and join our family of single-friendly churches.
It's been a great start to the campaign. Beth has done amazing work on it already, supporting those churches. The whole team has, on supporting those churches going through it. And it's fantastic knowing that so many churches are out there working their way through it. And it's really interesting hearing back from different churches. Some are very much, they set up a focus group. Some it's more directed by one person in the church. It's really interesting to see how different churches are approaching it. What's key to say is, as Beth said, is whilst there's a long list of suggestions and changes that you can make, we ask that you really commit to having made 2 positive changes and you're working towards at least 2 other changes. We're really aware that not everybody can tick everything, and it's not applicable to you. So we're really asking you to commit to making as many changes as possible, which is great. And it's lovely, hearing from churches that have really committed to doing this work during lockdown. It's become apparent to them, and we know that church leaders are incredibly, busy at the moment supporting their congregations and their members. So fantastic that so many people are doing this. And once you sort of join our family of churches, we're going to give you ongoing support and emails and bulletins and things like that, which give you, new information that's coming up, new resources that we found. And as we grow and develop as an organisation, we want to be able to feed this back to you as well. I know that I saw on one of the questions, I can't remember, who actually asked about it, but about teaching and about courses on singleness. We're really aware, and people do ask us about this. And we've recently linked up with Eleanor Jeans, who's set up a course on singleness. And obviously, because of the pandemic, she's really gone ahead. She's an ordained minister, and she's putting it online. She's developing it at the moment, and it's a course that can be done. It's 5 sessions, and it's going to be really easy to access. There's going to be a link that there's a small fee to pay. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's a small fee, and you can access this 5 sessions, there'll be a downloadable resource pack, a leaders pack, and also a members pack, and also the videos as well. And we've had first sight of this course, and it's absolutely fantastic. So if you're thinking, we'd love to commit to this work, but we need a bit more support or help, that's a great resource, and all that detail is going to be on our website. So those are the sorts of things that we'll be able to sort of give you continued support with. The other thing we've been doing recently, we've commissioned some research during lockdown. Single Christians, we had over 500 people responding to that piece of research. And it's about, it's asking single Christians what their experience has been of church during lockdown, the changes that have been made that are positive, what they wish they'd had more support with, that sort of thing. So we're going to be feeding that result out soon. So do, even if you don't want to commit to the audit now, please stay up to date with us. Just sign up to our bulletins and newsletters anyway, because you get that sort of information, which is really interesting and helpful. I saw a really interesting question who was asking, how do you engage more Christian men, both single and partnered, in addressing this problem? It seems to be women who are more likely to identify the problem or motivated to resolve it. And I think this is where, if you've joined this webinar and you feel passionate about this and you feel that it's something that you can really make a difference in your church, you have to be the champion and just identify people and just talk to them. Actually, this can be quite a great way to sort of ask people to do some research themselves and ask them to engage in the process. And by working through the audit in a group, you're hopefully going to have a mixed group of people of different experiences, ages and stages, and invite married people to be a part of that group if you can, as well as single people, because it helps to bring people together and to really talk and think through the issues and come up with the solutions. So where you can, we would encourage you to think of this as a group activity as opposed to a sole endeavour. I'd just like to finish by saying thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We know everybody is doing so much on Zoom at the moment, and Teams and all the rest of it, and it can be quite tiring. So we just say thank you very much for joining us and for engaging with our campaign. And we really hope and pray that you can join us on this journey, and look forward to hopefully welcome you as Single Friendly Church. So from me and from all the team, thank you for joining us.